Good day. Welcome to Nova Answers Weekly Wraps. I'm Vav Kavinder, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll start off with a general market segment before ending with the tech segment. In our general market segment, we're going to cover as usual, we're going to cover Trump's latest week and what it means. Then we're going to look at US employment numbers. Then the SONA and some highlights from that speech by the South African president. Then in the AI segment, I just want to cover a new development in AI, these reasoning models and what they mean going forward. Okay, let's start off with Trump for the week. A couple of developments. Firstly, we all knew about the sanctions that came and went very quickly. They basically indicate that Trump, as an individual, is very similar to what he was in the first term. He hasn't really matured. He hasn't gotten better at government. Remember the Muslim ban, the build the wall. He's consistently been somebody that will say a lot of things and not really follow up on them. Something else he did this week was threatening to basically wanting to to take over Gaza as the U.S. government, and kind of implied ethnic cleansing, which is the removal of people from a land. Those things, I think, are more flash in the pans. They may or may not basically come about, but you can't really rely on these statements. What was more impressive this week was announcements by Elon Musk, and I think that is the difference between the first term and the second term. It's not Trump, it's who Trump has surrounded himself with, or rather who has surrounded themselves around Trump. I think what's happened is that we've seen that after the first term, many individuals thought, this is an opportunity for themselves to get in positions of power and actually achieve certain goals. Musk is one of them. So what he did, what came out this week, was that he's appointed some rather young people, according to reports, between the ages of 19 and 24, in very senior roles at Doge, and they basically are the people that have gone to these meetings and gone into places like the USAID. Or like the Treasury and the payment systems, etc., the U.S. government, and are looking to basically firstly audit and then to a certain extent modernize and improve. There has been some setbacks. Apparently, some of these individuals have some rather disturbing posts, and one of them has resigned based on that. But I do think that this is a case where you're probably likely to see much more, concrete steps, concrete moves going forward than you would from Trump himself. I think Musk has shown himself to be, one of the world's best, operators. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. These are all things that, when they were created, were ridiculed, and obviously have all turned out to be quite, successful companies. Neuralink is a bit new, but so far they're progressing faster than anyone else in that space. Even Twitter, news broke this week that even though Twitter's revenue has halved, their profits have more than doubled because they've cut costs by so much. And of course, the profits are what matter when it comes to any company. And so, Musk has basically doubled the profits of the company he bought. So that's not exactly a failure in any estimate. He may have overpaid for it, but he certainly has a turnaround plan that seems to be working. And so I do think that what Doge is doing is going to be far more impactful than people have thought. It's going to probably significantly change how several parts of the US government work. It does seem to have changed how USAID works. And as South Africans, that's important because, and as Africans as well, is important because USAID has played an important role in Africa. And you may argue about things like, propaganda, etc., but there are some concrete, important projects that they've funded in Africa that have, objectively saved lives. I'm not talking about one or two lives. You're talking hundreds of thousands, likely millions of lives have been saved by USAID, initiatives in Africa. Things like, for instance, the AIDS medication program in South Africa. Very important. It helps, to prevent children from getting AIDS when they're born. It helps treat people on the disease. And I think it's about almost a fifth of the funding for AIDS, treatment in South Africa is provided by the U.S. government. It's also, however, done other things that are not quite as, one might say, legitimate. For instance, it's funded like the BBC. It's funded various media organizations, and obviously when you have the media organizations funded by the government, it's not a great sign when you come to trusting them for objectivity. So a mixed bag, but I think it's going to happen. And unlike with Trump, I think it's much more likely to stick than some of his other initiatives. So moving on to the SONA, we had the State of the Nation address by the president. The usual thing to expect, lots of promises, lots of things being announced. Whether or not they become achievable or not is, in doubt. But a couple of things I want to mention here. Firstly, the focus on job creation. Obviously trying to modernize the government skills recruitment program and graduate recruitment program for the government, which kind of makes sense. You want to have the highest skilled people you can in government, and that's a good thing. But I think the big one is also about almost R1 trillion over the next few years for infrastructure development in South Africa. If this is, coming through, it could mean a significant, amount of money flowing into construction companies. It would be a stimulatory kind of event. And, we have seen, for instance, Transnet recently, who went to their customers and asked for help to try and improve their rail system, in terms of funding and so on. That there is a need for, better funding in our infrastructure. And if we can get, this, moving through, it would be quite important. I think that's something to watch out for. So in terms of economic activity, that's probably the most important one. Other stuff, like for instance, the 20 billion rand fund for, black development or developing black entrepreneurship, etc. I don't think it's going to be as significant. That kind of money is not really, market moving, and often it's likely to be, captured in certain ways. But R1 trillion rand, is a significant amount of money over about 3 years or so. And I think that might actually have an impact on some of our construction stocks. And then finally, moving on to US jobs numbers. We started seeing jobs numbers coming out from the US. I'm recording this before we have the big job numbers of the week. But I do think that in terms of what's happened with regards to the US jobs numbers, we saw job openings a bit weaker than expected. And there is a fear that, we are starting to see some impacts of AI coming through in the market, especially in certain sectors like, programming and so on. It's obviously coming through. But I think AI is probably going to affect a number of different sectors. We've seen OpenAI release a report in which they talked about, paralegals, transcribers, obviously programmers, and a number of other fields in which we are likely to see job losses, call center workers, etc., due to AI. And I think that is, maybe it's a bit early for that to be fully seen, but I suspect over time we are likely to see that come through. The one example I'd put there as not like what people normally would think, but is actually likely happening already, is Waymo, is a driverless vehicle operating in several US cities. They already started to take significant market share away from Uber and Lyft. And a Waymo basically vehicle may have a teleoperator, operate the vehicle if there's some issue happening, but generally is going to be, probably providing less jobs than an Uber or a Lyft vehicle. And I think that even that's only going to basically progress over time, and too early likely right now to see that impact coming through in jobs numbers. For the next few years, it's going to make an impact. And understand, the number one job in the world, if you had to look at all the categories of job, the number one in terms of numbers is driver. If you have driverless vehicles coming about, those job numbers are going to be affected. Okay, now moving on to AI. I was going to give you an update on DeepSeek and some of the papers that come out about it. And so I just want to explain to you how AI works and give you an idea of what the new progression has been like. So AI basically, it works the following method. There's what's called pre-training. We dump a bunch of data into it. Then there's fine-tuning. We have human beings go and, fine-tune it, test the system, make sure it doesn't answer, bad words and say how to make poison gas and that kind of stuff. And that's been the old way of AI running. Now there is a new addition coming into this thing, the third level. This third level has to do with where you give it a question, a problem, where there's a very viable answer. And then you let the machine basically work on 1,000, 10,000 different, approaches to it. And then basically the ones get closer to the answer, and because it's a verifiable answer, they can determine that, in terms of an objective measure, are picked, and then that's used to build the system. Now, what's important about this is that the first part of this, the training is that dump data into it and basically tools use computing power and getting results. That's scalable. That's basically just computer power that is a case of power, more computer power and electrical power, and then money to do it. It's totally scalable. The second part is not as scalable because you need to have human beings involved in the process. The third thing they do right now is scalable because there's no human beings involved in the process. You just have the problems, you have the answers, and the computer determines whether the answer is good or not because it's a verifiable answer. There's things that are verifiable out there where you know what the answer is, and then you can basically see how close the machine gets to it, and the closer it gets to it each time, the better the end product is going to be. Now, what is important about this is that this removes one of the bottlenecks that people were thinking that it's going to be around for AI, which was human-generated data. Already the AI systems that we have, like GPT-4, etc., have access to or already have used almost all the human-generated data in the world. They've taken the entire internet. Yes, there are things like, for instance, videos that are not in there, audio that may not be in there, but most of those things have transcripts that already are being input into these systems, and so there is probably a bit of addition that can come through, but to a large extent they've exploited that. They need another source of data to basically work off, or another, because training input. And the way I saw this phrased by Ilya Zskaya is there's two forms of training a child normally does. There's firstly what is taught, and then what is learned through experimentation. Okay, so you teach a child basically, A, B, C, but then you also let it go play in the playground. And most of what happens that really makes that child exceptional is what it learns itself, when playing by itself, when it's experimenting by itself, when it's doing all the weird, childlike things that it does. We are basically entering that play area of AI, where AI is going to be experimenting and playing, around in a sandbox by itself, trying things out, etc., etc. And that, I think, has the ability to produce results that are going to be better than what human beings can do. The example you'd use is AlphaGo. Remember the old, this is about a decade ago, it's Go game, which is basically the game it's like a game like chess, but it's very popular in East Asia, but it's far more complicated than chess. And they had a program called AlphaGo, and AlphaGo basically learned how to play Go primarily by playing against itself, so self-play, so experimenting in its own kind of like sandbox. And then when it played against the best human player in the world, for the first time ever, it beat them. Okay, and there's a famous move called Move 37, which is when the machine played that move. It was Lisidol, who's the guy that was the best Go player in the world, looked at it and was gobsmacked, but how brilliant it was. And that is basically coming from self-play. You're not going to get that move ever from just looking at other games played by humans, because humans never thought of this thing before. The way this basically gave you the surprising move was because it was self-play. It was the machine playing against itself in its own, sandbox. What we are doing now is we are bringing that approach over to normal AIs, the other kind of AIs, beyond game systems, so general market AIs. And we are going to be having these things do these self-play things, not just in things like, for instance, mathematics, which is verifiable, not just in things like, for instance, maybe programming, which is also verifiable, but in things like robotics, which is verifiable in the real world. You must understand that the stuff that has been used up to this point in time, for instance, with things like movie generation or things like pictures or text, those things are not really self-verifiable. There's no test to say what's a good or bad sentence. There's no test to say what's a good or bad picture. It requires a human being to look at it and determine, hey, this is a nice picture, this is a pretty picture, this is a nice sentence. Okay, that's kind of where the human feedback comes through that. But now we're approaching a place where lots of other things are going to be in the system, and a lot of other things are going to be trained as well. And it's going to be those things that are, like I said, are verifiable. Things that are verifiable is, for instance, like I said, mathematics is verifiable. Programming is verifiable, because you write a program, it either compiles or does not compile. It basically either does what it says it's going to do or it does not. Okay. Things that are also likely to be verified, like I said, is robotics. Once you start using basically either physical models in the real world, or also physical models in the computer, or the real world, you will be able to have these machines play in, for instance, certain areas and like experiment with how to move their hands or whatever the equivalent of hands are going to be, and learn like a baby learns to pick up stuff, etc. And that is the next step. And like I said, the important factor to understand here is that this is scalable. And when things are scalable in AI, it moves very fast. Why? Because all you need to do is add more computing power and more electricity and more money to buy more computers, and you basically have what you need. We have the computing power coming in online. The new chips are going to be significantly more powerful. Understand, this is moving at beyond Moore's law at the moment. So we're talking about more than doubling every couple of years. In some estimates, it's like 5 times a year. So in like 3 or 4 years, you're talking about going from, like it's 100% right now. In a year, it's 500. In 2 years, it's basically 2,500. In 3 years, we're talking about something that's going to be closer to 12,500%. Initial thing in 3 years. That's the kind of improvement you see when you have a 5 times improvement. That is something that you're going to be seeing coming through, from the computing side. In terms of power, in terms of generation of power, we've seen basically like companies, like large companies, kind of step away from some of their green, initiatives around, being carbon neutral and so on. Elon Musk with XAI is going out and just burning natural gas, inefficiently to get these systems going. But we're seeing many other systems out there being built, and the systems right now currently being built are on the scale of, the power consumption is on the scale of a small city. We're talking like a 1 million person city. Okay, maybe that's not even a small city, that's a reasonably large city. Not many cities in the world are more than 1 million people. So a 1 million person city is the power demand by one of these data centers, and that's coming through. And of course, funding. We know funding is flowing in at an enormous rate. And when you apply that kind of scale to this problem, you're going to see results coming through in areas that have not until now been, amenable to the current techniques. Like mathematics, people are talking about how these programs don't know how to do mathematics. These programs don't know how to play chess. These programs don't know how to do basic logic, etc. When you have this new approach being used here, that's going to change very quickly. Okay, that's it for this week. I look forward to joining again next week. Cheers.